afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Team Tim. And we have quite the lineup here with our good friend Luis and Tim and Jesse and the other Tim and the other Jesse. And wow. So what are we talking about here? Is this CaaS? Is this coffee as a service or cats as a service? I don't know. I'm very confused here. Mr. Schnurr, why don't you come up and say hello and tell us a little bit about who, what, where, when, and what's going on in your world these days?
What's going on? Tim Schnurr, Inquisitive IT. I work with IT, not IT providers, but really baby boomers right now. Cybersecurity awareness, cybersecurity for the people that are no longer being protected by their company or MSP. So I'm helping them out, but really excited about the show. Compliance as a service is, I think, a term that Tim and I were throwing around 2 years ago as Pitch It, the competition. And, as semi-competitors, I don't want to jump on too early here, but I think the four of us all kind of have our own view on what compliance as a service is. So excited for today's show and, see how things go.
Mr. Miller, my friend.
Hey, everyone. Well, I was going to say I have Rusty over here helping out, but he seems to have found something more interesting to do. But Jesse Miller, founder of Power PSA Consulting and the Power Grid. So the Power Grid is a community where we teach MSPs how to build vCISO services. And so obviously compliance as a service today. Glad to be talking about that. We'll get into some pragmatic ways to start to deploy that service and some go-to-market stuff. So again, looking forward to talking with you all about this today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jesse. And Mr. Luis, go ahead, my friend. Let me pull you up on stage.
Thank you, Tim and Jesse. Luis Giraldo from Scaleplad. Obviously, we're a vendor, but I've also been an MSP for 16 years. Got out of that a couple of years ago, but spent a lot of time thinking about these things, compliance as a service, amongst other things, of course. And on the live stream that I run every Friday, this topic comes up so regularly, and lots of interesting, transitioning, business transformation, just rethinking of the mindset around compliance going on. So kind of cool to get into it today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I suppose I ought to take my own little hello to do whatnot here. So let's try this. I'm trying to control all 6 monitors in the matrix here. So, hey, good afternoon, everybody. Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Scorecard, where we help MSPs understand and operationalize compliance as a service, where we can bring you and your customers the scorecards to have that simple and easy risk conversation with your clients. All right, enough of that. Let me get me out of the way. Let's make sure we have the setup over here. We'll put the 2 compliance people at the top and the other 2 at the bottom, and let's just dive right in. So
I'm going to throw the first question. So, I think it's interesting. Scaleplad owns a compliance software, I believe. Maybe a little bit of a competitor or a director of a compliance scorecard. I'm no longer with Fort Mesa, but still sit on their board. But I guess what are we doing here today as competitors? Like, what's our goal?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't know if you want to tell it. We were together at CompTIA not too long ago. Obviously, we're at a lot of shows together. Our paths cross a lot. We just got to talking, right, Louis?
Yeah. And it's just like that. I think the industry overall just has this really strong community desire to raise the tide for all boats. You hear Matt Lee say that all the time, raising the tide. And I think we just sort of got into this casual conversation of can we, should we, how do we work together? And let's just remove sort of the product conversation so we can just advance, the conversation for everybody if we can. That's obviously the perfect outcome scenario. But, MSPs will choose what they choose. But I think if we're helping them along in the journey, then I think everybody wins.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, Jesse,
go ahead, Jeff.
Power Grid works with Synomi, so I think we got...
a three-way. Yeah, so they sponsor the Power Grid. So yeah, we're closely with them as well. But I think to your point, we complain so much about cyber people complain. No, that's not that would never happen. But no,
No.
we complain so much about there's more. The attackers have the leg up, and there's this skills shortage, and there's too much work to go around. But I think in a lot of ways that's facilitated a team environment in the industry because, as you said, Louise, we want to rising tide lifts all ships. So there's this atmosphere of co-opetition, as people like to call it, right? So obviously, yeah, there's going to be competitive situations where you're going to go up against each other, and the customer is going to pick the best fit solution for them. But at the end of the day, when it comes to education, enabling the community, and just enabling MSPs to better support their clients and increase the security of global infrastructure, I think that's something we can all get behind, right? And so that's where I see the blend there.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, Tim's example, because Tim, you have a compliance product only. And so you hang out with a lot of people that are doing compliance. At Scaleplad, we have compliance as one of our products, but that means we also are exposed to a ton of MSPs that are not doing compliance at all. So we're hearing like a whole variety of stories from MSPs that are in different parts of that, spectrum of evolution, if you will. And I think there's sort of a need that the industry is driving. We just need to get more people started on their compliance journey because your own compliance journey is absolutely critical to how you deliver compliance as a service in the future. And we just need to get more people into the hopper, if you will. And so,
yeah, this whole idea of, cooperation, right? That like competing products or not, there's 3 of them on here or whatever. And we may even throw Tim as a 4th, like, let's put the product conversation aside because the concept here is all of us being able to work together to better the MSPs, to ultimately better the small businesses. Because let's face it, it's the small businesses that are constantly under attack, right? And our jobs as an MSP is really difficult. And when vendors don't play together, we won't mention them because y'all probably know who they are. When they don't play together, when they don't integrate together, when they don't talk to each other, it just makes that really horrible, experience for the MSP, right? We won't mention some of the big ones, but when something happens and an incident happens at a vendor and the whole community is aware of that, we can react quicker. Now, there was one just recently, right, with one of the, remote desktop kind of tools. And because of the community, it was able to get out there quicker. It was able to have that, quick response. Now, granted, are they all fixed? No. But that's because like-minded vendors want to be able to work together, to have these conversations amongst each other and ultimately be better together, right? We've talked with Lion Guard and a bunch of others. I can throw out a whole bunch of names, but this whole idea of working better together so that we as the vendor community can help our MSPs and can help ultimately the small businesses. That's kind of where a lot of this conversation stemmed from. It had nothing to do with the vendor conference. It was you and I hanging out at CCF with CompTIA and just chewing the fat and trying to figure out what can we do. Let's take the logos out of the mix and how can we be better together.
Yeah.
All right, I got my pink hat. My granddaughter's here, so I had to have my pink hat today.
I want to continue on that. And I think it's interesting. And this might be another Matt Lee term. I don't know, blue ocean, red ocean, right? Like, so extremely new, greenfield, or is it very competitive and it's a zero-sum game. Like my win is someone else's churn as a vendor. And I think we're very early in this process, right? So MSPs, are on this journey to compliance. It's not something they've been doing for 10 years. It's something, fairly new. They're and it's different. It's extremely different from like the traditional, bar resale, break fix model. So I think we'll get into that, but I think this idea of being cooperative and as Louis said, raising tides, right? Like we got to basically get people to understand this. A thing that popped out a couple years, maybe a year or two ago, Lifecycle Insights, we weren't even hearing the word CIS in NIST at conferences, right? And all of a sudden they're putting it on their on Lifecycle Insights, like the VCIO platform, to kind of get people to level up and start thinking about like, how do I map my security to controls? And Tim and I are like, no, like, as competitors at the time, we're like, is that going to hurt us? Is that where the platform's going? And no, it was really just to kind of really bring up the level of security, the level of understanding to a framework. So I think it really is extremely blue ocean. It'll be a very long time till it's, red ocean. So.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was going to say, in my opinion, the whole framework thing, I think that only hurts vendors who are trying to put up smoke screens, right? So if you're a vendor that's doing the right thing, I think you want to be able to say, let's all get behind a standard so we can create a control and we can show exactly what our product can do. Now, if we feel that our product can't do well, then of course we want to obfuscate that and muddy the waters. Now, that's not an exactly binary comparison, but I think, on the fringes, there's fringe cases, but I think in general, that's pretty typical, and I think it's good for the industry. And bottom line, it helps MSPs. So if we're really walking the walk, or walking the talk, and saying that we want to enable and empower MSPs to do better, then we should all be happy with this, because it's only going to help raise their awareness and raise their level of maturity. So
exactly. And as we kind of dive a little deeper, and since the topic is compliance as a service, right? I think, one of the things that we need to be able to try to do as a community is define it. What the heck is compliance as a service? Right. I know that, we've had lots of conversations amongst ourselves. We've had lots of conversations with other great people in the industry, the Matt Lees and the CompTIA, and the list goes on and on and on and on. What the hell is compliance as a service? Is it wait, I mean, is it just like is it just a,
how about try 500 tools? Is that something?
Is it just a tool, like, or is it like way more than just getting to the
vendor? Do it.
Right. What the heck? What the heck is compliance?
Yeah, so I mean, as a service implies that it's continuous and ongoing, which is a good thing, right? Because a lot of compliance is check the box, maybe do it once, like maybe do a risk assessment. So as a service, I think we're going in the right direction. The fact that like cybersecurity is a continuous journey means that it's a continuous or recurring revenue business. So getting into the specifics, I'll leave that to you guys in terms of what that encompasses. In terms of
I'm reminded of a newspaper I see every once in a while. That's called the Epoch Times, and it's the same thing. It's the same word. Like if we call it continuous compliance as a service repeatedly, we'd be only slightly redundant, right? I think compliance is continuous by definition. And I think that's the interesting part, that is maybe that bit of evolution that MSPs have to graduate into as they figure out how to go to market with clients in this new way of doing business. Because the clients have never been involved in any of their IT or technology this much up until this point, where compliance is kind of driving a bit of a very different requirement from the customer side, no doubt.
Well, I think it's interesting because compliance is less technical sometimes than your typical technology management or even security program management exercise, right? I mean, we could look at compliance from a financial perspective, right? There's plenty of publicly traded companies, all know this. You got to have a compliance department for finance, right? So, and that has almost, right, exactly. So, we'd have to define what we mean as compliance by a service. Are we talking, but broadly, I would say compliance as a service is the management of a regulatory requirement for a company. Okay, that's what that's.
Thank God we recorded that. That's my note taking app.
Yeah, at the most fundamental level, that's what it is. Okay, so that we talk about business outcomes, right? And that's what it is to the customer. We're helping manage your regulatory burden and making sure that you can be sustainable in your business because you don't have to worry about that because somebody's taking care of it and they're on it. Now, yes, there's technology involved with that. yes, there's processes and, we got to do patches to stay compliant for most regulatory frameworks and that. But at the end of the day, it really is a process and a strategy and a tactical execution of regulatory requirements.
You're stealing my thunder. But okay, I agree. What he said. Wait, am I pointing the right direction? What he said. There we go. This one over here. I'm pointing the right direction. So no, I would agree that, in and of itself, taking the word compliance or the ability to comply, as Jesse said, follow some legal or regulatory or framework, follow something and comply to that thing, so that an MSP in practical terms, CIS, HIPAA, CMMC, framework, California privacy protection. It's not just security, HR, whatever. As an MSP, providing and here's the key that I like to use, facilitating that work for your customer. You're not actually complying them. You're facilitating that work for them. You're giving them the roadmap, right? You're providing the tool sets. And by the way, you probably should be charging for this stuff. And you're giving them that ability so that then they can comply. And you're providing that as an ongoing service, right? So at least in our 10,000 foot view, compliance as a service is essentially the MSP facilitating the compliance or the ability to comply to a thing, and you're providing that and charging for it on an ongoing basis, i.e. as a service. That's how I kind of interpret compliance as a service. Now,
I'm going to blow that up, Tim. I'm going to blow that up.
Right.
Most businesses are not regulated. Most small businesses. So when people say compliance,
I would blow that up with
compliance doesn't equal security. Well, for a small business that hasn't done anything, it hasn't picked something, started somewhere, as Tim always says, which is great advice, right? So compliance, like a framework, is just going to give you some good best practices, right? And some good, directional like vector, right? Like, oh, I need to go that way. I need to do something. So I think a lot of MSPs, like, as you said, I'm going to bet that the majority of clients are not regulated. So they just need some kind of direction, roadmap, WISP, as the Tim in Tim's peer group, SSP, like what's the difference, right? So I think compliance, like when people say compliance doesn't equal security, well, for small businesses, it kind of should, just because like they're getting some kind of coaching, some kind of direction. So,
all right, I'm going to blow that up, because when you said it doesn't apply to no regulations, I call bullshit, because let's pick on, because we talk always about security, right? Yeah. We talk about CMMC and NIST and the security side of compliance. Let's just pick on the 48 states now that have privacy laws in the book. Okay, so when we say regulation doesn't apply, let's just pick on privacy for a minute, because that hits just about every business in just about every state, and especially if you're overseas, now GDPR and all the things, right? So I would sort of beg to differ that there is, right, that there are regulations, there are laws, and if you've been watching anything coming out of the FTC lately, remember we talked about this a couple of months ago, where it's like the FTC safeguard rules, nobody cares. Well, it's kind of like the seatbelt rule. They threw it out there, and then it took a few years for the police to start pulling people over and ticketing them because they didn't have a seatbelt. If you've been watching what's been happening with this FTC stuff, they've been coming after people. They've been cracking down on this stuff, right? Kind of like the seatbelt law. First, it was a good idea. Then it started in the next state. And now you can't drive into a state without the big sign, click it or ticket. Louis, you had some comments on this, maybe? Some additional insight?
I had Wayne Selk on the live stream a couple weeks ago, and we kind of got into this a little bit. And CompTIA is working on the cybersecurity trust mark and trying to do a really important thing, I think, for the entire industry, and trying to create some kind of standard around some of the things that MSPs should be doing. But one of the comments he made was this interesting question: is like, can the industry self-regulate, and is self-regulation the right or the needed amount of accountability for something like this? And I don't know. It feels like it isn't. If we were doing the right thing, most businesses would be pursuing this of their own volition and not waiting until some kind of law passes that forces them to go down the path, right? And so I think there's maybe this is part of, I guess, the mindset change that needs to happen where, like, can businesses or will businesses decide to do this on their own if nobody's forcing them to? And I don't know if that's the case. It's a tricky question to answer.
So
It is definitely a tricky question.
There's two other catalysts.
Okay, Tim.
I'll let you guys go, but obviously, like due diligence pressure, like as Tim said, like is the data, does my customer care that like the data is in good hands? And then there's cyber insurance as well. So there's other catalysts as well, but like the regulatory aspects certainly come into play. So, and I noticed I've Canada, right? Like there's some regulation. What is there, Montreal or over there? And then there's So
No, and we have programs at the Canadian level, PIPEDA and other things that apply in many scenarios, whether you know it or not. And so if you didn't know and you go and do something and somehow your data is exposed, you will end up paying the price for it. But Canada launched its own compliance framework as well, and it's kind of the writings on the wall. I think. And it's specifically kind of marketed or designed for small businesses. It's kind of the wording that they've used. And so I can see a little bit of what they kind of intend to do. And I've reached out to some of those folks that run that program at the governmental level to see if they'd come on the live stream and talk about it. But I can't even elicit a response. They're probably not checking their LinkedIn messages is what it is. But or maybe I sound like a bot. Either way, I think the challenge is going to be this will be coming down the pike, and it will be regulatory and required for all small businesses to comply, at least at some level, with a core set of controls that is removing a bit of the risk for the average consumer. Because I think this is a challenge. Governments are starting to look at, well, all our consumers are being affected by these issues, and we need to, again, go protect the consumer. And so
Luis, I have a really great question. So it's actually going to really pertain to you because I don't know what the heck is going on with Canada and then the Australia, New Zealand markets. Those two markets, it seems like every day I get new people from either of those two markets asking questions, like firings. Like it's almost as if like some new magic law went into effect, and every single business is now like, help me with compliance. And it's Canada. Our last, not to talk products, but our last 5 customers all came from Canada and New Zealand or Australia. Like, what the heck is going on in these markets? It's really odd. Really, really odd. So, anyways, I just, as you were talking about Canada, I was just thinking about like, what's going on in those two markets that I'm obviously not aware of and need to do more research on.
I didn't have that same experience in Canada, but Australia has this Essential 8, which is very new, very modern, very prescriptive, very much like CIS. South Africa, another one called Papaya or something like that. Have you run into that, Tim?
No,
Poppy, POPI. Yeah.
But Canada, didn't typically get a ton of interest. So.
And the Canadian one, which is called it's super exciting. Baseline cybersecurity controls for small and medium organizations, is fairly new. Like this is just in the last year. This was kind of published, and so there's this. And even the website, and I think if you, I don't know if I can post to the chat live here, but if you just search, Canada cybersecurity, it takes you right to a page where there's a very big focus on information for small and medium organizations, and then there's this baseline cybersecurity controls. And again, none of this is in theory required or legally mandated for businesses to do, but that's the writing that I think is on the wall for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Is it coming up? It's not coming up. All right, never mind. I thought it was coming up, but it didn't. Obviously, it didn't come up. So I had it. I was trying to share the screen. It didn't work. But the link is in chat for y'all. So something good to go reference later. So So let's regroup. we all agree that compliance as a service is following something, helping them to comply to a thing. And as MSPs, we're delivering that on an ongoing basis or as a service. All right. Whew. Going forward, we have all kinds of questions here in the private chat.
We're never going to make it.
We're never going to make it through there. So, Tim, where are we headed next?
Yeah. So, in terms of like where the MSP is now, right? So, like, what are key elements that are easy for an MSP? Like 5 things maybe that an MSP can take and leverage in this new compliance as a service. And like, what does that entail? I guess like, it's not like installing a agent and monitoring it and doing the results. Like, but this might be a question for Louis, might be a question for Jesse, because Jesse, obviously, the vCISO alignment, I think, really aligns with compliance as a service.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something you're directing your, the people you work with, your clients, to aim for compliance as a service, or is it more just like, do people hire a vCISO without doing compliance as a service? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, they do both for sure. I think that it comes down to packaging, and you need to have a good go-to-market strategy. And it's interesting that we're talking about this today. I just posted up on my daily LinkedIn post my worksheet for creating a go-to-market strategy for a vCISO or a compliance as a service offering. I just posted that in chat here, or in the comments, so you guys can take that, download it, and start getting some ideas and building out an offering for this. Now, to your point, Tim, I think, yes, you're going to definitely see needs for vCISOs in non-compliant environments, but the lines are becoming blurred, right? There's two different things. So you have running a security program for a business on risk to keep them secure, and this goes back to the security isn't compliance, and I don't think they'll ever be mutually exclusive, right? So running the security program, but then I advise customers to typically have an add-on package that's a higher monthly to do compliance as a service for the customer. So I think you need to have a vCISO program and then a compliance as a service program that layers on top of that, because you have to have somebody integrated in the business who understands the security program and can get the answers to understand if we are compliant or not, because you're just doing rework if you're not adding that. And that goes to the focus of a go-to-market strategy, because if you are not focused and you're offering just compliance as a service to your customers, there is no way you can deliver that with effective margins, right? You have to be very clear about, are we going after HIPAA compliance? Are we doing, the Australia 8? Are we doing that long Canadian name for small businesses, right? What are we doing and what kind of clients are we going after? And we have to build out processes. We're going to have to iterate and learn and understand what that costs, because until we do it, we have a best guess at cost, right? And we have to tweak that down. Now imagine you've just told a client you'll give them compliance as a service, and they bring you 3 frameworks that you didn't know about. I'm working with clients right now who are so underwater in contracts because they said, we'll give you all you can eat compliance. Don't do that, right? Don't do it. It's got to be a very focused go-to-market strategy.
Prescriptive,
prescriptive, and say we'll give you these 5 or 6 outcomes for this standard and this framework, and anything else is a project. And that's how you keep your 60% margins, and you get that good blend of professional services with MRR, which is like the golden standard for the way to make money as an MSP.
Great stuff. Yeah, that whole project creep, and it's happened to us in the past with as we were at our MSP with, we will help you. We will do compliance we will deal with all your compliance, and then they bring us FedRAMP moderate equivalent, and I'm like,
right.
Oh, wait a minute, let's rescope here.
Yeah. I mean, the gateway drug here was the security questionnaires, right? That we started getting from clients all the time. That we just started doing them for free, and I think that kind of set the stage for some of the expectations when that became more than just a security questionnaire, so they could land a contract that to get some new business. But again, 2 things. The MSP's own journey is just so critical, and I saw a couple LinkedIn posts, comments that came up on the screen, but they flashed by real quick. Yeah, thanks, Bart. Yeah, the importance of the MSP going through their own journey on this, because I think again, we have to get out of this mindset of the traditional VAR model of like just, I'm going to wait till my client raises their hand and they say they want compliance as a service, and then I'll go buy something and deliver it. This is going to not be the right way to do it, because I think you need to be intimately familiar with the process, the audit structure, exactly what are some of the challenges you're going to run into before you start to try and scope some of this work. And Tim, you and I were talking about this, like, people massively underscope CMMC assessments, for example, because they don't understand the requirements, and they come into it really, and then they take a big haircut just trying to get this thing out the door. Eat your own ice cream. I love that. I'm going to change my expression to that. 100% their own journey is a critical first step. And whether you're just doing a little bit of CIS just to get familiar with the process, or trying to get to some full audit result through a big framework, I think either way, we just have to do it. Now, the challenge obviously is small shops maybe just don't have the manpower, the resources to really run this through. And we see this all the time. They get started with the process. They have this great intention of finishing it within the year, and the proverbial poo-poo hits the fan, and there's just no way to get through it because there's no dedicated resource. And so it's just more of a mindset of just building into the process, into the things that we're prioritizing inside the business. The focus is key.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, Tim. Like with this, you said small shops like getting buried. So, my previous GRC tool time, everyone says like, oh, you've got to get self-help, right? It's like the airplane's going down, you got to put the mask on the kid before you put it on, you could put it on yourself actually before you put it on the kid, right? Because you have to survive. But I think with MSPs, especially the small ones, don't want to call them trunk slammers, don't want to, talk about like the little guys, but they don't have time, they don't have resources. I've had some good experiences where like they've actually come that as you said, that buyer catalyst, right? The client has some regulatory problem, due diligence problem, and you kind of like that jump starts they're getting paid while they're learning to fly a little bit. So that it is unfortunate it goes that way, but I think that is one way that they get jump started. It's a little cart before the horse, but at the same time, like if they don't have that pressure and they don't dive in at some point, like when are they going to ever, self-improve? So sometimes they do learn on the clients, on the battlefield as opposed to practicing. So.
What was the question again?
Well, we started talking about, it was a great comment on here talking about, there it is. This comment.
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah. I did. So in full transparency, I know one of the last lessons I learned on our live stream is I'm always looking all over the screens, but I have 4 monitors trying to stream here and give you my full undivided attention while I'm dealing with the comments and moderating and that. So, all right. The question
You're not going in and out though. It's good.
I know. That's because I turned off the AI part of the camera for now.
Nice.
Did I? Yeah, I did.
Much better.
So the question, I think, if I remember correctly, was what is an offering from an MSP, right? What are the kind of key components that go into a compliance as a service offering? Am I correct in thinking that's the right question?
Yeah.
All right. So from our standpoint, the key offerings that go into a compliance as a service offering is first, do you have the human to support it? If you don't have the human that can dedicate a couple of hours a month, maybe an hour or 2 a week at a minimum, to building out some kind of program like Jesse was saying, right? If you don't have the human, don't do it, period. Just don't, right? Because you're going to end up owning all that risk. I mean, you already own the risk anyways. Maybe compliance as a service can help mitigate and transfer that risk or deal with it. But number one, if you don't have the people, don't do it. Make sure you have that. And here's where I hear a lot from MSPs. Do I need to hire a CISSP, MD, DBA, like 40 acronyms after the name? You probably need somebody with some technical expertise. right? I know Jesse and Tim and Luis and all of us have, and the community at large have been putting things out of like, get this cert, get that cert, learn this and learn that. You probably don't need to be, the master doctorate triple CISSP person, but you do need to have enough technical knowledge to understand the difference between certain controls. So have the person. That person doesn't have to be Wikipedia, but they have to have some of the knowledge around it. One of the sort of soft skills in that person is the accountability piece, the planning piece, the attention to detail piece. And when we discuss this a lot with the MSPs that we work with, I'm not talking to the level 3 technician. In fact, I'm talking to the account managers. I'm talking to the TAMs. Number one, they're the client facing people. They're the ones that can actually have a conversation with the customer, unlike us technical geeks that talk in ones and zeros. And it makes it that much easier for your customer as your MSP to put that client facing role in front of them, give them enough of the jargon, but not too much, so that then the technical people behind the scenes can actually click the ones and zeros and do the things, right? So have a person, have a process, and that person doesn't necessarily have to be the quadruple CISSP, whatever, multi, certified person. All right, off that.
We came across a great partner in the UK who was doing a really interesting thing. They basically internally, as part of their own process of onboarding a customer, aim for CIS IG1 as a baseline for every single customer. The customer is not necessarily even aware of that. But when UK Cyber Essentials comes along, or the customer says, "Hey, we need to be compliant," or what have you, it's a much smaller step. The gap from IG1, IG2, or all the way to IG3, and it's interesting because it has put the MSP in this mindset of compliance by doing it, at the baseline, even internally from the get-go. And I thought that was a super interesting way to think about it. But in terms of go-to-market, like when you put an offering together, it strikes me as like if you're a small shop and you can only go so deep on the project management, on the detail and scope of everything you're doing with the customer, you might just do a lightweight sort of guidance thing. You sit on the security committee with your customer every few months and give them the guidance. Let them do some of the work. Let them participate in their own rescue, which is a great phrase that Rob Bowles at Blockworks says all the time. And if you have, expanded a bit of your offering, if you got your VCSOs in place and they can do the deep dive and they can manage and handhold the customer front to back, the entire process, then obviously that's going to command a bigger, higher rate for that level of involvement. But I think there's definitely a spectrum of how you can get involved. I'd say also try not to bite off the entire thing at once, because I think as MSPs we have this tendency of like, we're going to get all our customers compliant, and then you give yourself this impossible task, and when you realize you can't hit it, you're just going to put it off, and then procrastination takes over, and printer tickets become
you
a
just
priority.
you just did one of the things that I bark at my marketing company all the time, and that is use absolutes. Like, we'll get everybody fully compliant. No. Don't ever talk in absolutes unless there is an absolute, right? It drives me nuts when people start 100% SOC 2 compliance in 30 days or less, automated, hands off for $99. All right, so we're about. I know we're going to have to leave a little early, and we're very disappointed because I think this is going really well. As we're kind of progressing towards some of the new different topics, for those of you that are on the stream, we're so glad you're here. Feel free to keep firing questions. We're going to try to answer them as quickly as we can. I know Mr. Schnur has some things queued up for us. Where are we going next, Tim? Oh, there we go. Of course. Thanks, Brad.
Changing speeds a little bit, and this would be a question for Lewis or Jesse or Tim. How do you recommend an MSP charges for this? Like all in, one price, time and materials, like hourly. Yeah. How do you, because it obviously as a vendor, you're bringing that to them, and they're like, "Go ahead, Lewis." Yeah.
Pick me. So a couple of ideas, right? Remember, this is a continuous offering. And so
Right.
I think, these, unless you're doing sort of a one-time gap analysis or you're doing some of a assessment for getting a customer ready for CMMC, or there's like unique scenarios in those opportunities that you might do a project fee or set fee. But in the context of MSP, of working with your existing clients, definitely I would think about doing this in a continuous fashion. And it depends on the scope. Again, we just talked about this idea of like, you might be just doing some light hand holding on the project management side and helping the client just get going on their own processes internally and so on. And that might be an extra $400 a month, plus the platform cost, right? And because you're making all this available to them and helping them guide through the deployment and setup and et cetera, et cetera. But a bigger organization also has more stringent requirements. They have deeper data dives that they have to do, and so you might be charging $1,500 a month for this. I've heard stories of people charging $3,000-$4,000 for a very heavy compliance framework. A regulated industry or customer. So I think it depends on the industry. First of all, it depends on the level of involvement you have. And obviously, the deeper you're going on the actual compliance management process and how much of the work you're taking on versus the customer, you're going to have to manage that scope a little bit. I would aim, obviously, like most MSP margin conversations, you want to aim for like an 80% gross margin, 50% net margin on pro services here. And so you got to be able to cover all that cost and because it's time intensive, right? It's resource heavy.
Yeah.
You mean I can't get it for $99?
Well, therein lies the rub, right?
Thanks, Mark.
So are you throttling? And I'll kind of follow up on that question. Tim, you can take this one. Are you throttling like you're like, don't spend more than like a ceiling of hours, or how do you get them comfortable that they can budget and execute on that, call it recommended price tag that you guys are putting out at Control Map or Compliance Scorecard?
So
Go ahead, Jesse, and then I'll chime in after.
Well, I think it depends. Again, this is about the focus and the go-to-market and understanding what kind of compliance you're dealing with. So, but typically, I'll just tell you from broad strokes how I design a vCISO and or a compliance program is if they go with the highest package, we have enough dollars built into that we can front load the cost of the onboarding. But we give people an option. Do you want to be, or we give you an initial push and then help with maintenance of the program. So you can have a large chunk onboarding up front and then a lower monthly, right? Or if a customer just wants to dip their toe in the water, a gap assessment is a great way. We'll come in and tell you where you need to go. We'll give you an actionable roadmap and actually provide value that you can, if you don't want to work with us, you take it to somebody else and execute it that way, right? If you want to work with us, we'll remove it from the onboarding. It's just, we're just moving the dollars around at that point. But, then I think having break lines in the monthlies, like one of the break lines I always recommend for MSPs doing vCISO and compliance is when you get that, the break line for that high tier package is auditor interface. If we're doing a low 4K a month program, I'm not going to talk to your auditor. You're responsible to do that. And I'll give you all the stuff to go deal with the auditors. Now, if you want me to come in and do like executive representation for an audit, now we're bumping up closer to 5 figures monthly, very honestly, because I'm running that program and I'm basically an executive that's inserted into your organization. They're talking more like mid-market at that point. But those are just some things to be thinking about as you're pricing your packages.
So I know, hold on, let me do this over here. I know Luis has to go. I know, and we're very sad to lose him here in a minute, but I want to give him an opportunity, and we could keep going because I have a couple of thoughts on the packaging and pricing. But I want to give Luis a second to kind of talk about, his key takeaways. Talk about, how do we go forward, right? And so, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, definitely. In the last little while, I've been exploring a lot of philosophical topics around Stoicism because I've been reading this book called The Daily Stoic, and it's incredible how frequently this concept around focus and prioritization appears in the book. And I think there's a really clear need for MSPs to actually prioritize compliance, their own journey of compliance, and just getting it done, like being just very pragmatic about it, setting up some goals, realizing that it's actually a long play, because I think the challenge is we like the dopamine hit of the quick fixes, and it's tough to see us get into these long journeys of a year-long process for the first compliance of SOC 2 Type 1, for example, or seeing the rainbow and the gold chest at the end of the rainbow with Type 2, and so that's just an example. But I think prioritizing and focus is going to be key for the internal journey. And that's step one. If you're not doing your own thing already, just start thinking about that. The industry has leaned heavily a bit into CIS, I think. And so that's a great place to start. It's a super easy thing to implement. And for the most part, the majority of MSPs are doing a lot of it already. And it's just a matter of documenting, getting some of that data really, really tracked, and understanding where you're at, and just continuing from there. So I'd say the journey.
So, and take 30 seconds. Where can we find you? Where can we learn more? I know you have multiple different podcasts, which is why you need to go now, because your next one is in what is the next one in a couple minutes?
Just the one podcast, my friend. I appreciate how omnipresent you think I am, but it's just the one live stream I do once a week on Fridays at noon Pacific. It's called MSP Confidential. Today I have Bob Berg, who's the co-author of The Go Giver, great book around giving value first. And so he's coming on, and I got to jump in case he dials in early, as I requested him to do. So yeah, mspconfidential.com, or visit us at scaleplad.com to learn about any of our products, of course.
Always good, my friend. We'll certainly have you back. You can bounce whenever you want. And the three of us will kind of finish and wrap up the show here, because I wanted to circle back on, I didn't get to chime in on my pricing. So Louis, good luck with your show. When we finish this, I'll jump on over there. So thank you, my friend.
All right. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks.
So circling back, I hate this layout. Hold on.
I love that
All right.
layout.
I hate that layout. It goes like, I feel like I'm squished.
We all look skinnier.
Yeah. So circling back on the conversation about packaging and pricing, and if I can get my 2 cents in, I'd love to be able to get my 2 cents in, because everybody else did. So
Do it.
do it now. So when I think of, and I work a lot with the MSPs about how they package and price, and how they can build out a vCISO offering. I keep doing it backwards. A vCISO offering, right, with our friend Jesse, and building out a compliance or regulatory or a thing as a service. We kind of look at the good, better, best, right? We sit alongside the MSP sales team here at Compliance Core. We sit alongside them and we understand their business. How do they package and price, and what SKUs and what things are they doing in currently today? And everybody goes right to the tool conversation. Oh, I have this, and I have this, and I have this, and I package this. Yeah. And that's great, because the tools help us make us more efficient. And so when I think of a compliance as a service offering, I bet you already have pieces of that stack already. So this is not a tool conversation. This is a process and operational. Can't say the word. This is a process conversation, and how do you operationalize that, as Jesse would say. Mm-hmm. So in the stack, look at the 6 things that insurance is asking for. Backup, 2FA, policies and procedures, next gen AV. Look at the 5 or 6 things that insurance is offering. Wrap that in some FTE, right? Some hours, right? And you build a good, better, best, as Jesse suggested. Step 1, annual security risk assessment against some framework. Identify the gaps. Great, that's package 1. Step 2, let's start to remediate those gaps. Package 3, we're going to do, quote, quote, as much as, quote, quote, reasonably possible with under our own MSA. Building the package out as a good, better, best. Take these 5 or 6 things that you're doing, and that's a SKU. Mm-hmm. Add a couple of hours to that, maybe a gap assessment. Or package 3 is all of that plus project work for remediation. In step 3, you just hired a full-time FTE vCISO to manage all this stuff month over month over month over month. At least that's how I see it, and how I've been communicating with our MSPs to build a good, better, best pricing structure.
Yeah. So I don't do this anymore, but that's exactly right. I was building GRC roadmaps or compliance roadmaps that were fitting for the ICP, as Jesse talks about, right? So,
Right.
and some of them are just plain, but there might be one K through 12, like, kind of what business are they in? Is data protection more important? Is uptime more important? Are they looking for cyber insurance readiness? All different roadmaps. And actually, the way I recommended to price it is actually you're doing the same amount of work, but if it's a longer framework, so if you're going to be FedRAMP high, 171, like R5, I'm sorry, that ain't happening in 2 weeks. That's happening in 5 years at whatever our cadence is. So that's one way I kind of throttle the, the usage or there's going to be a lot of one-on-one time, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not doing compliance, which you've typically done with reselling tools, Tim. You can't scan and fix remote, patch a vulnerability with your RMM, right? Like there's no face-to-face time. There's going to be a lot of face-to-face time. There's going to be a lot of policy, a lot of people.
Yeah.
We certainly talk about the CIS mapping, vendor mapping, right? Like how much of that stuff is policy? And policy is where you started, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, not again.
Policy as a service.
Yeah. Well, I just want.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah. I mean, we can move on from this conversation, but one thing you had asked earlier, and you were just alluding to, Tim S, was how do we protect ourselves? And again, I think as you mentioned, if one customer needs 171 and one customer needs CIS or just an insurance to fill out an insurance questionnaire, it's two different conversations. So all the problems with pricing start to go away the more focused we get. Okay, so that's one. And then when you the way you protect yourself is, I've always said, put a not to exceed in the contract. The quote calculator that I've developed has it has some fixed deliverables. Those are outside of the not to exceed number. So like you said, Tim, we're going to give you like a yearly risk assessment, maybe a tabletop, based on the packaging and the ICP. And then we're going to do a set of recurring program management activities. And those are a little more ambiguous, but those are governed by a weekly not to exceed. So whether it's 4 hours a week, 6 hours a week, 8 hours a week, we're not going to exceed that. So then if the client comes to you and starts saying, we need to do all these things, it's just a reminder to say, hey, we're scoped for this much per week. And we've been going over by about 2 hours each week. So we can either back off and slow down, or you can go up to the next package, which has more hours built in for that. It's a very easy conversation because they've been scoped clearly. So using that not to exceed to govern and rate limit some of that stuff is a real good way to go about it.
Yeah, I love the not to exceed. We do that. We did in our MSP. We did that a lot, right? So Bart brings up a good conversation here about the tools to risk, like understanding that, the tolerant, all that fun stuff. So. Mr. Tim, I know you have lots of conversations around risk.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a gorilla in the room, right? I mean, and Jesse and I have both talked about risk as a service, or why risk management, or this concept of risk, talking with the small business, understanding their specific business risk or business outcomes. It's all about that cohesion, right? So as an MSP, you have IT that's there to like augment or increase revenue, but also risk is about like not losing that revenue. Like a penny saved is a penny earned, right? So a penny protected is a penny earned. So having this risk conversation with the business owner and understanding how compliance or the controls that are in a compliance framework are great, right? Like it's really gonna better your relationship. And Bart's made a couple comments here about having that cohesion, having that one-to-one understanding of risk in the business and how you're out there to protect them. You're going to get a seat at the table. So
I want to, can I give a plug, but not for anything on this show?
No, definitely.
It's interesting that we're talking about this because I just finished my course for Empath that I did on there with exactly what it's called. What is risk? So if you have an Empath membership, go check it out. We go through a lot of those concepts that Bart was just talking about, but not only just talking in risk, taking and applying that to our customers' business vernacular, things like competitive advantage or market volatility, and using those conversations to drive how we look at our cyber spend. Yeah.
Yeah, we love our friends Alex, Kyle, and Wes over there at Empath Cyber. See the link, go visit it.
I think it's
after the stream because
I think it's Empath MSP. I think it's. I
Yeah,
think
they started out as Empath
Yeah.
Cyber, and now they've brought on a couple other lads that are.
It's empathmsp.com now.
yeah, Empath Cyber will get you there
Oh, well,
too.
okay. Got
They
it.
both
All right.
will get you there. I know the whole. All right. Either way, after the stream, when we're done, bantering, head on over, say hi to Wes and Alex, take Jesse's course. Mine will be there hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and maybe
Can't wait.
Tim's will be there too. Yeah, I got to get my act together. So, well, now I have a good backdrop, and I can
There you
actually
go.
record, and I got the pink hat going on.
Yep.
So, slowly getting there. But yeah, our good friends over at Empath, they're really helping MSPs take that educational and accountability approach to teaching your people as well. So in the last 5 minutes, we always talk about a key takeaway. Tim, do you have something before we dive into that?
I'm ready for you to jump into your key takeaways because I know this is like you got a lot in there and you got to.
I'm gonna let you go first. Your key takeaway.
Okay. Yeah. No. Absolutely. So I mean, this service, compliance as a service, this new MSP offering is a lot to get your, wrap your head around. Right. You went from selling tools and I sound like the echo chamber here talking about selling tools, and all of a sudden you're going to do compliance as a service, right? It is a lot. So, I mean, it is helpful to, go to Empath, talk to Jesse, talk to Tim about how do you price this? How do you get comfortable with conveying that value or getting into that value conversation, talking about risk, right? And then talking about compliance or talking about meeting a framework, even if you aren't really regulated. I know Tim says everyone's regulated, but so I think it is a difficult thing to do. So the more support you have, the more community around, join all these communities that you can get involved with about compliance. CIS has just exploded. It's a great framework. It'll support any other framework that you want to, go after. So compliance as a service, check these guys out.
Awesome. Jesse, you want to go next, my friend?
Yeah.
Let me do this. Hold on. I'm getting there. It's like I kind of half know what I'm doing. Wait, it's not me. It's you.
There we go.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say my takeaway is that this is not something that you can wing. Okay. I think a lot of MSPs have been built by just kind of winging it and being like, I'm good at computers. This is a different ballgame. It poses a lot of risk to your business if you don't take the proper steps and protect yourself. So just like you're asking your customers to think about risk, you need to think about the risk you're taking on by offering true compliance as a service. And make sure that you have a good strategy and a go-to-market plan to make sure you're pricing appropriately, protecting your margins, and protecting your people when you do this. Like I said, I dropped a link in the comments to my worksheet for building a go-to-market plan for a compliance as a service or a vCISO offering, or you can follow me on LinkedIn or check us out at the Power Grid, and we can help you with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I suppose I ought to give my own sort of show it here at some point and kind of do this little
Yeah,
thing.
I'm speaking again on this insider threat. I'm speaking with John Pryor again, but check out my LinkedIn. Our UK friend about protecting IP in the ages after no non-competes. So that's another thing we're talking about this week.
Super interesting conversation.
Yeah, non-competes. Oy vey. Yeah. All right. So my turn. Wow. All I can say is this has been really great, right? We've had a lot of great comments throughout this entire show. I appreciate everybody coming and chiming in. When I think of compliance as a service and I think of trying to offer that as an MSP, number one, you better damn well have the human. If you don't put the person accountable and the person responsible, you're just going to end up with way more risk, right? As Brad Gross pointed out, risk equals liability, right? Accountability around that. So have the human, have the process, and then define what goes into those SKUs. And more importantly, define what does not go into that service, right? As our good friend Brad and Eric, the MSP lawyers, talk about, right? Start with your MSA. Start with your statement of work. Start with, this is the scope, as Jesse said earlier. This is the good, better, best in that scope, with the limits along that scope, so that you can then upsell along the way, not for the sake of upselling, but for the sake of maturing your customer along the way and charging for it along the way. Stop giving this stuff away for free. Stop doing those risk questionnaires or those cyber questionnaires away for free, right? This is actual time, effort, and energy that your MSP is putting into this work, so you should charge for it. You don't ever go to the doctors and say, oh, today's visit's free, right? You don't ever go to the gym and today's is free. No, start charging for that work and charging appropriately, and start with the people, start with the process, pick a framework, pick a package price, and get your MSA and your scope of work together. If you'd like to know how we are doing this, how we are helping MSPs do this, we have an ebook. Go grab it off our website. We are rolling out this 6-part compliance as a service offering to help you and help your customers on how to do this work. That game plan is sitting right on our website. Feel free to head on over there and grab it. And look at that. Tim went over his couple of seconds.
We knew that was coming.
There you go, Mr. Schnurr. Here is the layout that you love, my friend. What do we have next week?
I don't know, honestly. I think Lardo's on either next week or the week after.
Yeah, I think it's Lardo. Yeah.
Is it Lardo? As always, let me drop that in the comments as well. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out, bantering with us. Feel free to keep popping your questions. We'll try to answer them as time goes on. It is 3:01. Let's make like a tree and leaf, and everybody have a good rest of your week.
See you, everyone.
Subscribe now.